Freedom of speech. It is stated in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 2B, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including the freedom of press and of other media of communication. This freedom has certain limits, though. The Charter permits the government to enforce reasonable limits. Hate speech, obscenity, and defamation are common categories of restricted speech in Canada. It is common knowledge that hate speech is a problem. It is clear to everyone that hate exists. As intellects, we've tried to solve it. We've tried to remove hate. It's proven to be difficult. Evil is what we are, and good derives from our conscious activity and reasoning. For many years, and even presently, the common belief is that to cure our evil, we must seclude it. I stand here today behind this screen or in front of you to reason with you why I think hate speech should be protected rather than secluded. Freedom of speech is a building block of our society. Using the freedom of speech allows us to share our opinions and allows us to analyze various perspectives with ease. Unfortunately, anger is usually involved in these discussions. This anger can lead to people making illogical decisions. Having opposing political opinions can be detrimental to a relationship. A current solution to this problem is to put political correctness into effect, which is a term used to describe language, policies, or measures that are intended to avoid offense to members of particular groups in society. Of course, this sounds beautiful and harmless, but that is not the case. A few questions must be asked first. Who determines what offensive is? And where do we draw the line? The answer to both those questions may vary. Jordan B. Peterson, a professor at UOFT and clinical psychologist, stated in an interview, quote, "Yes, of course hate speech exists. People say horrible things, reprehensible things, criminal things even, all the time. It's brutal. And some of them cause a lot of trouble. It's self-evident that there is hateful speech. So then they say, let's regulate it. Okay, fair enough. Because it's hateful. Maybe we'd rather that there weren't any hateful speech. Okay, no problem. Who defines hate? Well, we'll worry about that later. No, you won't. And that's exactly the problem." End quote. Let's put ourselves in the following situation. You want to talk about something important with somebody, but your only rule is that you can't offend anyone. Sounds easy enough, you think. That's fine, it's only one person after all. Okay, now let's do 10 people. Trying not to offend 10 people proves to be a bit more difficult, but it's manageable. Okay, now what about 1,000 people? It's impossible. You're going to offend somebody. Maybe they don't even care about what you're saying. Maybe they just hate your guts. The mere fact that you exist offends them. Okay, well then just don't speak. What's so important about talking? Well, now you can't think. Now we have one less person that can contribute to the development of our society. First it's one person, then it's a whole country. What happens when we have no opposition in a society? We stay stuck in a society that can't progress. Making hate speech go away doesn't make hate go away, it hides it from the public. Of course, I believe that there are people who say horrendous things that should be stopped. But there's a huge difference between hateful speech and "you're making me uncomfortable" speech. You shouldn't have the right to feel comfortable. It is because of this belief that we should feel comfortable that we are raising a generation that believes in the freedom from speech rather than the freedom of speech. Simply because you don't like it or you don't like to hear it doesn't mean that nobody should hear it. Social media has used this excuse of comfort to enforce terms on people such as racist, sexist, classist, not to improve society, but instead to silence the opposition. Intellectual comfort isn't a right and never should be. Not if we want the freedom of speech or freedom in general to survive. In Canada, we're losing our freedom of speech because of the belief that we all have the right to feel comfortable. In 2017, June 15th, Bill C-16 was passed. Bill C-16 sounds like an absolutely amazing thing. Bill C-16 added the words gender identity and expression into 3 places. First, it was added to the Canadian Human Rights Act, joining a list of identifiable groups that are protected from discrimination. Second, it was added to a section of the Criminal Code that targets hate speech. And finally, it was added to a section of the Criminal Code dealing with sentencing for hate crimes. Brenda Cosman, a professor of law at the University of Toronto, explains, would it cover a situation where an individual repeatedly and consistently refuses to use the preferred pronouns of a certain individual? It might. This is a huge problem, because this means your freedom of speech is being controlled by what the government thinks is politically correct. So this gives an answer to our first question. Who decides what offensive is? The people who are in control, whether that be the government or the owners of social media companies. Where do we draw the line? It depends on who's in control. This is incredibly dangerous because this is how democracies die. So what do we do to achieve freedom of speech without allowing an outbreak of violence? My conclusion is that we need to allow people to speak their minds. If what they say isn't what you like, then that's too bad. Without allowing people to speak, we will never be able to achieve the freedom that we desire, and we will never grow up as intellectuals. We need to allow hateful speech to present itself so that we can control it, because if we don't, then nobody will. Thank you for listening.